Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the Sedra of kedoshim that, please God, we will read this coming Shabbat. And we are dedicating this learning for the speedy and safe release of all of the hostages remaining in Gaza and the safety and security and success of all of the soldiers in the IDF. And the whole time period has been very dangerous and challenging, but there is an escalation. And as we go into Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is Wednesday and Thursday of this coming week, or the week that we're in now, and to really have in mind with everything that we do, everything that we say, and everything that we refrain from saying, that Hashem should listen to all our prayers, and we should merit to see miracles of the nature that we have been witnessing over this time period. And please God, we should be celebrating all of the things that we so fervently daven for. And the Sedra of kedoshim, although it's not the most densely packed of all the Sedras in terms of mitzvahs, we have a hefty quantity of mitzvahs. We have 13 mitzvahs aseh and 38 mitzvahs lo aseh. So we have 13 mitzvahs that require us to perform an action, and 38 mitzvahs that are lo aseh. We have to desist. We are prohibited from performing certain actions, and so we have a total of 51 mitzvahs in this week's Sedra. So that is a lot to get through. And the range is really breathtaking. And sometimes if we find a pattern, find a scheme, then it helps us understand the connection, and it's just whether it's a memory aid or we just are able to process all of this huge amount of information, the things that we are meant to be doing and the things that we're supposed to refrain from doing. And the heading is also a very good place to start, and a good way to get the concept of what actually Hashem is requiring of us before we get into the incredible detail. And the Sedra called kedoshim, opens with this is chapter 19 of the book of Vayikra. Daber el kol adas b'nei Yisrael, speak to all of the congregation of the children of Israel, va'amarta alehem, and you will say to them, kedoshim tiyu, you should be holy, ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokechem, because I, Hashem, I am holy, I, Hashem, am holy, I am your God. And these concepts, so if we have this sort of holy socks, what does this word holy mean? It's not a Jewish word. Holy, I think, is borrowed from Catholic religion, and it perhaps conjures up an image of some very pious person wasting away, refraining from eating and drinking, refraining from normal human interactions, certainly not a married person. So this is the word holy. But the word kadosh, the word kodosh, is something that takes us in a very different direction. And among many, many explanations, I want to choose three given by different rabbonim in terms of looking at this array of 51 mitzvahs in the Sedra. We can find ways that we, according to the Torah, will achieve the state of Kedusha. And just again, going back to our opening pasuk, this concept of you should be holy because I, Hashem, your God, am holy. We have to understand at the outset that the holiness of Hashem is otherworldly. It's not something that we will ever be able to achieve. However, by emulating Hashem's ways, by following the commandments that are specifically set out in this week's Sedra and generally, and we learn because of this phrase, Kol Adas B'nei Yisrael, all of the congregation of the children of Israel, we learn that this portion was said at Hakel when every man, woman, and child was present. That the mitzvahs that are contained within this week's Sedra were said over, and also the explanation that they're perhaps an amplified version, a fuller version of everything that is said in the Aseres Hadibros. And so this is really giving us the best kind of idea of how to achieve this state of kedusha. So the first heading that just to understand what kedusha is requiring of us, according to Rav Shimon Shkop, we are required to be selfless. The Torah is telling us that we shouldn't be focusing on ourselves. This is one way that we achieve Kedusha. And I think it's also one way that the wisdom of the Torah is the original and the source of all wisdom. That today the clever people, the psychologists, the psychiatrists are often playing catch up, because when people want to achieve and feel better about themselves, if they do things for other people, if they come out of their own heads and their own needs, if they stop focusing on that and rather think about how they can help other people, they will often be able to help themselves, and whether it's lift up their mental state, and achieve things that they would not be able to achieve if they look inwards and focus on themselves. And I think we can find examples of the selflessness of thinking about other people in this week's Sedra. And just a perfunctory, quick look, for example, the mitzvahs in this week's Sedra that require the farmers to leave the corners of their field, to leave the gleanings to leave the ears of corn that have dropped, to be thinking about people who don't have a field, who don't have food, and rather than just thinking, this is my field and I'm going to harvest the entire square meterage, to think, no, I'm going to leave for people who have less, and in this way I am displaying selflessness. That it perhaps is what Rav Shimon Shkop is referring to. The second way that we can think of the concept of kedusha is chashivus. Now, the word chashivut, chashuv means important. What is significant when we have a day stretching ahead of us, or perhaps at the end of the day when we look back? What have I done? And what is really, really important? I'm going to sometimes have to play it backwards, think before I do something. In the fullness of time, am I really going to value this particular action or thought, or am I going to think, no, I could have spent my time and my resources better? And there was once a story about this lady who was going off to work, and before she went to work, her child had dropped something and lost it, and she was searching, helping them look for it, and she looked under the bed and she found, whether it was a piece of the jigsaw puzzle or some small item, and she gave it to her child, and she runs off to work and has a day at work, and whether she achieved a lot at work, but her day was spent at work, and she came back and she thought she didn't have such a good day. And when she came home and her child said to her, you made my day because you found that piece of the puzzle and I was able to complete the puzzle, and that was so important. So an action that actually she had not thought of as being so significant turned out to really make a difference to somebody else's life, and actually gave a value to her day that perhaps other things that in the theoretical priority list were higher up turned out not to be so important, not to be so life-changing, whether for herself or for someone else. And so perhaps this idea of kedusha is asking us to ascribe chashivut, significance, importance, to what we say, to what we do. And I think in this way we are on the path to emulating Hashem. We are on the path to achieving some level of kedusha. And the third idea is this idea that is suggested by the Chida, who is Rabbi Chaim Yosef Azulai, and he says it's muzuman. Now, muzuman in colloquial Ivrit means cash, but the concept actually means ready. to be ready to achieve something, to be ready to do something, to know, and it is linked in some way to this idea of chashivut, because it is knowing what is important. We've talked about chashivut just before, but when you know what's important, then you will want to be ready. If you have a journey and you're leaving very early in the morning, you know that you have to make sure that you've got your important travel documents, that you've got the items that you're going to need. You're going to have to be prepared. And really living our lives in this state of preparedness is a way of achieving kedusha. So I think that when we look at these three ways of thinking of kedusha, we look at this idea of selflessness. We look at the idea of being of giving importance, selflessness, chashivut, importance, and then Muzuman, ready, and slightly different concepts of holy, certainly very far away from the English nuance of the word holy. And I think that this really does equip us, and referencing to certain mitzvot that we see in this week's mitzvah packed Sedra, that is a really good way to help us achieve holiness. And it is so relevant to us always, and especially now when we are trying to connect to Hashem, to really achieve the miracles that we are so focused on achieving. And everything that we do has to be with this heightened sense of purpose and correctness. And this really is our opportunity to turn the challenging times that we find ourselves in to opportunities, to ways that we can improve, refine, elevate ourselves. And that will be something that we will be able to attest that from what appear to be really bleak times, terrible challenges, turned out to give us the platform to become better people. And just picking up on this idea of the relevance of everything that's in the Torah. And perhaps when something seems to be less relevant, then we need to actually look deeper and see it is in fact completely relevant. And in this context, I refer to the chapter 19, Pasuk 4, Al tifnu el ha'elilim, do not turn to the worthless idols, the Elohei Masecha, and molten gods. Lo sasu lachem, you shall not make for yourselves. Ani Hashem Elohechem, I am Hashem, your God. And the last time any of us made molten gods, for example, I don't think was ever. So how do we find this relevance in that particular mitzvah? And I think, as so often, we look at Rashi as the starting point. Al tifnu el ha'elilim, do not turn to the idols, la'ovdom, to worship them. Elilim loshon al. The word elilim is related to al, not, because kolo hu choshuv, an idol is considered as a non-entity. So the words are actually really giving us a very interesting format to help us desist from this activity. That if we think that we're too sophisticated, and in the year 5784, 2024, there's no such thing as molten as idols or molten gods made of molten metal, and it's really not the case at all. First of all, the Torah is telling us don't turn. Don't actually look in the direction, because that is often going to be the first stage. If you know that there is something forbidden, do not look at it. Do not put yourself in a position where you're going to then think, oh, that's interesting. Let me investigate a bit further. So that's not a question of being closed-minded. It's a question of knowing that just like you wouldn't want to inhale poison gas physically, this is the spiritual equivalent. So if there are idols, then do not turn your don't turn your gaze, do not turn your body posture to look and to sort of say, oh, let me do a comparative course here, because they are non-entities. And very often when we can see different types of Elilim, of idols that were worshipped, and some of them were nature, were aspects of nature. So, for example, the sun or the universe, the sun, the moon, the stars, the wind, the sea, and people would confuse the items that Hashem has created and think that they have some kind of internal specific power, whereas really they are aspects of the oneness of Hashem. And in and of themselves, they are things that have been created by Hashem, but they have no intrinsic power. And certainly they are not something that demand any form of worship. We worship the Creator, the one and only Creator. Everything else is an offshoot. And then when we have this idea, the elaboration of this concept of a molten Elohei Masecha, and what happens with the metal that is boiling, literally molten, and then it, in order to become the idol that is worshipped, it needs to have a mold, become a certain shape, and then it will harden, and it will be something that people would potentially worship, whatever, really worshipping themselves actually, but they would do whatever the protocol required. And the thing about these molten idols is that they may seem very real, very valuable, and very, very firm. But really, all it takes, if you fancy changing the shape, then you just need to heat up a furnace to the required temperature and put that particular statue inside that furnace, and before long you will have molten liquid, and you can make any other shape that you require. And perhaps this concept of a molten, of a Elohei Masecha, and the word Masecha is also connected to the word mask. It is the sort of the mask, it is hiding behind that shape, professing to be something that it is not. And so this concept of being able to change the shape to suit my whims, and this is something, call it fashion, this is something that, again, we can certainly find in our modern times and apply to our own lives, that when we read this prohibition, we can understand that it is something that is very much part of today's life and part of today's challenges. And these particular words, like all of the particular words in the Torah, are talking to us in the here and now. And please God, everybody, the whole of Klal Yisrael, the people of Israel, should have a good month of Iyar, should have, please God, we should merit to see the miracles that we are so fervently davening for, and we should all merit to see the ultimate miracle of the redemption of all of the hostages and all of the people of Israel. Please God, we should be on that path towards the full Geula and redemption. Thank you very much for listening, and wishing everybody Chodesh Tov and Shabbat Shalom.